There's a video I've been wanting to make for a while that I called When Your Favorite Author Slows Down or something like that. Basically, a decline in quality is a result of them being overextended, be it they just ran out of ideas and they had to start recycling stuff, or they're forced to churn out books rather than take the time that they need to polish each individual story, especially when they get older, as many authors seem to be. But today, as of writing, April 7th, 2026, I learned that my favorite author, John Flanagan, passed away. I found out while doom scrolling Instagram, a fan account posted a memory and a little tribute to him, and yeah, it came as a very unhappy shock to me. I haven't really read his books in a while, and that's where my original video idea came from, is just talking about how sad that made me. Because there was a noticeable decline in quality, and that's where my original video idea came from. Like, I just couldn't force myself to sit through those books, and I wanted to talk about how sad that made me and the possible reasons why his books weren't as good as the old ones.
Why did I stop with the Ranger's Apprentice? I thought it was time. I thought everybody had grown up, all of the relationships were settled, and I thought if I kept going, there wouldn't be any further development. It would just keep repeating itself, and I didn't want to do that. I thought it was better to have a definite finish for it.
There surely is some insight or lesson to be learned in how publishers pressure authors to produce and how that leads to a drop in quality, as seen in John Flanagan's later stories, because he did come out with a book like clockwork, it seemed like, and yeah, but still, that's a story for another day. And even though there was that decline in quality, and I haven't read his stuff in a long time, I still consider him to be my all-time favorite author, because he's the author that got me into reading and writing. And that is, as you can tell by my channel, kind of my whole thing, because I love storytelling, and he's where it all began for me. I'm 23 years old and I'm a digital native, but I am old enough to remember a time before the smartphone. And I remember when I was a little kid, my family was taking a road trip and we stopped by the local library to get audiobooks on CDs. And that was my introduction to Ranger's Apprentice. I spent the car ride drawing on a little art pad these detailed color pencil sketches of the characters. And I remember pulling over to a gas station and showing my mom, and her saying, "Oh, wow, that's really good." And it's just a fun family memory. And my most vivid memory from that road trip was during the burning bridge. There's a sequence where Will, Horace, and Evelyn have to hide under a bush, and the Wargulls are marching past with their slaves, and an old man falls over, just too exhausted to carry on, and the Wargull spears him over them when they're hiding in the bush, and just how terrified that made me. And I remember asking my parents, like, pause the book, I need time to process this, and I can't remember if they did. It stuck with me, just that experience of being so engrossed and affected by the story like nothing else I can really remember. For a long time, I stopped reading. It was probably because I got my Xbox 360, but it was during another road trip years later. I was living in Florida. We went up to my cabin, and it was on the way back down to MSP to head back down to Florida. I was just really kind of bummed because my girlfriend at the time came with us, and she was being a bit of a hag, and just having to leave the cabin and go back down to Florida because Florida sucks. I decided to listen to an audiobook on my phone on Audible, and it was Ranger's Apprentice. And that just, for whatever reason, it just clicked, and I got sucked into that series. And for months afterwards, listening to those books, I binged them, and there was nothing else I wanted to do. To the point where teenage me, with all my devices and activities and whatever, I just sat in my room in the dark listening to these books on my phone. Like in the middle of the day, all I wanted to do was sit and listen to John Keating read those books, and it consumed me to the point where I started trying to make my own wiki. I wrote like early fan fiction, and I even made like chapter by chapter analysis videos about the books. And uh, all I wanted to do was just Range's Apprentice. And how hyped I was when these new books were coming out. And I remember when I was a little kid, I felt betrayed when John ended Range's Apprentice and started Brother Band. And then I was like, whoa, there's the early years books? There's the Royal Ranger? And just how hyped I was that new ones are still coming out. And that's part of the sting is when, like, I can't even remember the title, but it was when the evil cult Diamond, the Fox people, they took over Castle Heirloom and they were stuck up in that tower. And then there's the cameo of the brother band like that. After that book, it was just kind of bleh. Ranger's Apprentice is the series that inspired me to pursue writing like seriously. And before I found my own voice, I was just emulating John Flanagan's, which I love so much. And my love for this series has kind of shaped my whole life from when I was 15 up until now. I took immense comfort in that world and story and great inspiration. When I left home for college, I was hell bent on becoming a great writer and studying the craft, all because of Ranger's Apprentice. I've written multiple novels worth of material in my fantasy world, which has undergone a lot of evolution since it was first conceptualized. It went from being a lot like John's, where it was just real places and cultures with the names swapped around and
Viking, Scandian,
leaning on stereotypes and everything to make a fantasy people. Then it turned into alternate history based on the inspirations. Then high fantasy, where I went kind of wild after really discovering Tolkien. And since then, it has kind of mellowed back out as I've refined my vision. And it's very similar to John Flanagan's take on fantasy, just with more refined idea of what I want the fantasy counterparts to be and deeper lore. And now here I am, after 5 long years of collegiate study, having gone back to where I started in high school, just better read and better practice, but still profoundly influenced by John Flanagan's work. Upon reflection, what stands out most to me is that John, as a writer, he's not uber successful like J.K. Rowling or insanely gifted like J.R.R. Tolkien was. He's just a modest writer of young adult fantasy adventure stories that don't really do much to advance the genre or anything. And yet, my life has been profoundly touched by his work more than any writer. It's to the point where I can't really tell my story as someone learning to be a writer without mentioning him and his influence on me. The secret sauce really is just his voice and his themes.
This series of books happened, they weren't originally books, it was an idea I had for to teach Michael, my son, that reading could be fun. And I also wanted to show him that heroes didn't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger types. You know, you didn't have to be a big muscle-bound guy to be a hero. You know, and anybody could be a hero.
He started writing short stories for his son, who at the time was being picked on because he was small. So he wrote stories about a small boy who used that to his advantage. That, combined with John's love of archery, became the Ranger Corps, crossing the Texas Rangers with Tolkien's Rangers of the North to create an elite medieval brotherhood that is ever vigilant, defending the kingdom and its people from all sorts of ne'er-do-wells. Lots of people have written Rangers into their fantasy stories, but none have really gotten the formula down so well as John. But his books aren't just about fantasy. They barely are fantasy, really, since they're like two fantasy creatures and a smidgen of light magic, like that only appears a couple times. What really counts is the found family story. John's most impactful writing is in the small moments, telling the story of an orphan boy who finds a father figure and a purpose in life with Halt in the Ranger Corps, and of a man who, having been ejected from his family, found camaraderie and purpose in the Rangers and his adopted son. John is such a super John was such a superb character writer, and his cast was fantastic. Halt and Will, along with Horace, have one of the best dynamics I've ever read, and the side characters, too, are all wonderful. The Brother Band Chronicles is his other series, also about a found family, a group of outcast boys and a drunk who form a tight bond and rise above, defying limitations and expectations through the power of wits and resourcefulness and friendship. For all the great adventures that these characters go on, John's stories at its core are books about misfits coming together to win the day. These are the stories that enthralled me as a lonely kid who didn't really fit in anywhere and craved adventure. John hit all the marks, executed all the tropes in such a satisfying way to give me the escapism that I needed, and something to dream about and aspire to. I'm I'm honestly a little bit emotional just thinking about it as I write, and I'm really sad to have to say goodbye. The effect John had on me is a testament to that you don't need to be massively famous and successful to touch people's lives. Everything you create will touch someone, and even if it's only a few, that still matters. It makes people's lives better, and that always counts. And even if people and their creations only last a little while, they never truly end because their legacy continues on through what they make and inspire in others. So thank you, John, for inspiring me. God bless you. You're loved and you will be sorely missed. Thank you for writing your books.
Okay, in the fifth book, Will becomes a minstrel. He poses as a minstrel as an undercover identity. Fare thee well, grey beard halt, fare thee well, I say. Fare thee well, grey beard halt, tomorrow's another day. The best part of life about being an author is this is what I always wanted to be. I get to do what I love doing, what I want to do, what nobody tells me to do, and that's just absolute joy. I love it. Greybeard Halt's a friend of mine, he lives on Beacon Hill. Greybeard Halt never took a bath, and I reckon he never will.